Committee on Finance meeting of March 18th. And would the clerk like to, actually, we got a call to order first, so we're all set with that. So if you would read the opening remarks, Mr. Fletcher.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this virtual meeting of the Barnstable County Assembly of Delegates Standing Committee on Finance will be conducted via remote means only in accordance with applicable law. Members of the public may watch the meeting through live real-time broadcasts at www.youtube.com/user/Barnstable County. A public participation guide and meeting documents are available in advance at www.capecod.gov. The County of Barnstable does not discriminate in the administration of its programs or activities on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or other category protected by state and federal anti-discrimination laws and regulations. Reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities are available upon request. For more information or file a complaint, please contact Justina Marchak, Barnstable County ADA Non-Discrimination Coordinator at JMARCZAK@capecod.gov. Call 508-375-6646 or visit capecod.gov. Members of the public may also attend the meeting remotely through Microsoft Teams, and all of that information is available on the website at capecod.gov. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Clerk Fletcher. We'll just take a moment of silence to honor our troops who have died in the service of our country and all those serving our country in the armed forces. Okay, if you can, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the justice for liberty and justice for all. You guys get that? I cut out there for a second. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, you're here.
Okay. So first on the agenda is a discussion on the fiscal year 2026 and 2020 grant funding for Cape Cod regional government programs.
You haven't taken a census yet.
I'm sorry, roll call first. Yep.
No problem. Sorry. Vice Chair, well, actually, Deputy Speaker Frizel.
Here.
Delegate Gallagher.
Here.
Vice Chair Killian.
Here.
Delegate O'Malley.
Here.
And our chair, Dean Oman, is absent, although I do see Delegate King available as an alternate, Mr. Chair. Are you here, Delegate King?
Yes, sure.
Okay. You've got a full complement, Mr. Chair.
Very good, thank you. As stated, item number 6, which is a discussion on fiscal year 2026 and 2027 grant funding for Cape Cod regional government programs. And I believe Deputy Speaker Frizel, did you have comment on this?
Yes, I do. I guess what I'm trying to understand is how we are to interpret the information that we have from the administration regarding this. And looking at the budget book, I see in places where there's information about how many FTEs are funded by grants. We have information in some departments which identifies certain FTEs that are either wholly funded by grants or partially funded by grants or some other source. We do have a statement at the beginning of the budget book saying that department heads were asked to show the details of grant funding for their departments for informational purposes. And we received from the Deputy Administrator Herrick, we did see the chart, which is, as I see it, looks like it's up to date to March 6th, which shows us the information we had last year updated on each of the grants and what they're for and positions financed, how much money they provide and how much money we have to match. So there's a lot of data there, but I'm still not sure how how we reconcile or deal with grant information versus the budget book. So it would be helpful to understand the thinking behind the administration in putting this budget book together in connection with the grants and what information they were intending for us to see in the budget book with respect to grants. And then I can get a little better handle on what it is we're looking at.
So we can step back to last year's budget review, where it's essentially the similar situation. What about that process were you uncomfortable with, or were there any parts you were specifically uncomfortable with as it relates to grants and in FTEs?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we were trying to get at, and we issued a report, if you remember, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, we issued
Yep.
a report, in which we said we wanted to track this going forward, and in particular, we want to see how this impacts the county's finances, and whether we did some investigation on, what kind of tail liabilities there could be if grants were terminated. I mean, this all got started, by the way, when there was a threat that all grants would be lost. I mean, and it was a big number, and we were worried how that would impact county government. So while we found out, there's certainly very little, it seems, in the way of tail liabilities. There are occasions where we do move people from grant to general fund. There are some people who are financed in part by general fund, in part by grant, but we don't know what happens in terms of the grant monies. Do they, in effect, at the end of the day, when the fiscal year is over, does that mean that we have spent less general fund money than we had budgeted, and therefore we get money that goes into the reserves? Still not so clear about that. I do see in the budget book for several departments that the amount which is actually spent year to year for several fiscal years is less than the amount that was budgeted. I don't know why those numbers vary, whether the grants have anything to do with that or not. So I'm just trying to get a handle on how the grants affect the budgeting by the county when we look at the general fund that we're asked to review every year and approve by ordinance.
Deputy Administrator Harik, would you be able to perhaps explain a little of this?
Sure. What we don't do is commingle the grants information with the general fund operating budget. Because for the reason, as I explained at the last assembly meeting, we don't want there to be misunderstandings as to what is being proposed to the assembly for their approval and appropriation, as opposed to what goes on the grant side of the business. The assembly, as a general rule, doesn't approve the receipt of grants. That's at the executive level. And so we have not integrated, so we're very careful not to integrate, with the exception of a summary at the beginning of the budget book that summarizes, and for the reasons that Delegate Frizel and his colleagues were asking last year. Well, how do grants impact the budget? Well, there are a variety of positions in the general fund that are partially offset by grants, and then there are some positions at the county that are not the responsibility of the general fund. So in the summary table at the beginning of the budget book, we sought to present that in a summary fashion. Don't want to belabor the review and approval of the general fund with discussions about grant funding to the extent possible. Having said that, the inquiry last summer did yield, I think, a lot of positive result and information. And I think in the memo that the assembly published, you seemed satisfied with the answers as to the impact of grants on the county's operation, and evinced further understanding of that by virtue of the information that we provided. And since that time, I've kept that information updated such that we can have as much of a real-time sense of where the county stands within its general fund footprint, within where the county stands with regard to incoming grants, general fund and impacted or not, and expenditures and staffing therefrom. So what you have before you is the fiscal year 26 information. So grants in hand now, and people and full-time equivalents supported, and the amount of money, salary and fringes in those far two columns in fiscal 26 currently. And then what is predicted, although there are no guarantees relative to incoming grant funding, but what is predicted to be funded from grants, and again, salaries and FTEs in the upcoming, in the next fiscal year 27. So that is what this packet of grants information has here. You know, how grants impact the general fund. In other words, grant funding is additive and supports services that are supported by the county and that are in many cases not supported by the general fund. I think would be the Cliff Notes version in the headline, an answer to that question.
Delegate King, you have a comment?
Yeah. Sorry. I was just wondering, how do we measure success of how we're doing and grant revenue?
I think it's a very interesting question. I'm not sure it's the scope right now. At least I'm not prepared to answer that question in terms of measurements of success and metrics and follow-up. Is it content related? Is it purely financial in nature? I don't have a quick answer to that question.
Clerk Fletcher, you have your hand up.
It's just we're catching an echo. I don't know why. If people can try to mute when they're not talking, we can pinpoint it, or I'm not sure why we're getting an echo yet, but okay. Anyways, sorry.
Okay. Deputy Speaker Frizel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let's follow up what comments came from Deputy Administrator Herrick. All right, so let me take a simplistic overview and tell me if it's too simplistic, wrong, or it's right. So what's going on is we have a budget before us. Everything in this budget that's before us is money that's coming from the general fund revenues that are listed in the book. None of the money that you're seeking in this budget has anything to do with grants. Grants is a whole separate pot of money that supports a whole different, or to some extent integrated, but supports itself, the FTEs that you list at the very beginning of the budget book. So at the beginning of the budget book, you show that there's a total in FY27 FTEs of 210.4, and of the 210.4, 41.56 of those FTEs are grant funded. But the monies that we use to pay the people who are grant funded, that 41.56, those monies are not either on the revenue or the expense side shown in the budget book. That's my first simplistic overview. And if that's correct, let me know.
Yes.
Okay. So then in looking at, in part, in answer to what Delegate King just asked, how do we measure success? And we looked at that to some extent last year. And first we looked at it as on a financial basis, because we're the finance committee. Obviously, there's success that's not measured by dollars and cents, by the work that's done by people who are grant funded. We're not going to get into that. What we're talking about as a finance committee, the financial success. One of the things the report asked is, can we be shown any surpluses that result in the budget that go into our unreserved surplus that is there because we received these grant monies and we didn't have to spend as much on the budget from the general fund that we anticipated when the fiscal year began. Is that something that's possible? Is that something that just isn't possible?
Well, I think on a position by position basis, it is possible. I think that when you talk, that's, I mean, that's less impactful on the general fund than I think, and we have our colleagues here from the Cape Cod Commission, and they budget in this fashion. That on the Cape Cod Commission side, it's my I don't want to speak for them, so I won't. But I think they have a similar, a similar approach in some senses when grants come in and are able to offset from top line budgeted salaries. So we could add it up. So yes, that information would be available.
Okay, that was one of the pieces of information that we were interested in when we wrote the report last year. On the commission side, it's different. I mean, they actually put into the revenues when they start the fiscal year a certain amount of grants. And that is part of the funding they're counting on, maybe because they've already got the grants. They know it's going to be there. And so they can count on it as a definite in terms of their budget. And then if other grants come in later, it may offset more of their budget because they show a gap year to year in the difference between actual expense and the budgeted expense. When we reviewed their on Monday, I think we reviewed their budget, and their answer to me at that time was, yeah, some of that gap is attributable to the fact that we have grant funds that come in and offset the other funds from the environmental protection tax, and we end up generating some surplus from that.
Yeah.
So I was
It's the
just
same
wondering.
situation with us. It's the
What's
same
that?
situation with us. We do have, we have grant funded positions that we know are either grant funded or not going to be there. And then there are times during the year where fortuitously funding comes in that is able to offset general fund, otherwise budgeted general fund salaries, and then we do so.
Mhm.
We have that, yeah. So I guess that's an analogous situation then. Yes, certainly. I mean, our baseline position and sort of ethical approach to this is to try and conserve general funding as much as possible in
Right.
this regard vis-a-vis grants.
Right. Well, I think if there could be some generation of figures for us of how that has been, how we measure that so-called financial success of the use of grants, that would be helpful for us to see.
Maybe I misunderstood Mr. King's question then. I mean, in terms of how do we measure success? When I think about that, having come from a public health background, I'm sort of all sorts of metrics flood my mind in terms of how we measure success. But as you stated, you clarified within the context of the finance committee, you are looking. So the measurement of success that you're suggesting is how much further offset, fortuitous, shall we say, offset in the period of a year's operations takes place as a result of grant funding. Is that, do I understand your question?
Yeah, it's sort of like it's an avoided cost to the general fund.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Delegate King?
Yeah,
Just to add to that, boy. Just to add to that a little bit, last time we saw the budget to actuals for this quarter, for this year, it was $20 million worth of revenue fund. I guess it was federal grant funding that had no budget against it. So how do I know what that? I guess the question I had was, how do I know that $20 million is good or bad?
How do you know? So first of all, I think the reverb we're hearing is you might have two. Do you have two sources? Two connections, Delegate King, to this call open at the same time.
I don't know. Hold on. I'll go away.
I'm going to say
No,
yes.
don't go away. I'm about to answer your question. Okay.
Go
so
ahead,
if
I'm here.
Through the chair, all budgets, all grant funds that come in and that are expended by us are done so via a budget that's proposed and entered into Munis, entered into our financial tracking system. Budget exists for all grants.
Then why can't you just report it out when you each month, each quarter?
I don't have an answer to that question.
Okay.
It's not come up. It hasn't been requested to my knowledge, and don't have a rationale for doing so at this time.
Just in very simple terms, Vera, because it seems like year in and year out, we've kind of gone through this a little bit, and it seems that the grant funds and the general funds kind of get trued up at the end of the year because we don't always know what grant funding we're going to have in any given year. And obviously it sometimes we do rely on the general fund to cover some costs, but generally speaking, the grants cover what we're trying to accomplish. And at the end of the year or throughout the year, we kind of get reconciliation of that. So isn't that typically what we look at as we go forward when we get quarterly reports as to what's coming in grants, what's coming in general receipts?
Honestly, I don't have Carol here, so I don't, not being evasive, I just don't know what she tracks on a quarterly basis in terms of inflows and outflows in this regard. Some grants come in all at once. Some are come in on a reimbursement basis, and so there might be no activity in a particular quarter, and then more in other quarters. It's to me, it's unfortunate. It's a less straightforward question than you might think. If we could be made to understand what additional information you want regarding grants, then we will do our best to provide that, and the systems and processes associated with that for your information.
It just seems, and Delegate and Deputy Speaker Friesel can correct me, he's just trying to determine where the funding is coming from and how we reconcile it going, from through the year. Delegate or Deputy Speaker Friesel, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just following up a little bit on that, Mr. Chairman. So I think what might be being asked, perhaps by Delegate King too, is we have a general fund budget. It shows revenues and it shows where those revenues are spent. Maybe what we need is a grant budget that shows, here's the grants that come in. This is the revenue from grants. This is where that money was spent, like we do on the general fund. Some of it's spent in the health department, some of it's spent on Cove, some of it's spent, you name it. I mean, you've got a lot of it already known because you've given us charts about FTEs. So maybe what we're looking for is sort of like a grant budget that shows grants monies in and where those grant funds were spent on an expenditure line, analogous to what we have for the general fund.
Per grant?
Mm-hmm. Well, overall, you could say we got this much money in grants, okay? Like we get all these revenues from the excise tax, whatever. And here's where those revenues went. Here's where they were spent. They were spent to pay this person in the health department or that person in the Cove. This one was spent on the co-op extension. It gives us an idea of where those funds came in and where those funds were spent. That's all.
Okay, so based on the information that we've provided already, we have the salary and fringes part of the things. That's in those far right columns. So you're looking for additional detailed information on all other grant expenditures?
No. I think what we're looking for is just presenting it in a different form. I think it's presenting it more like, here's the revenues, here's the expenses, and where they were. I mean, not just showing where they were in what department. It may be just taking your chart. Frankly, Vera, it may not be all that much more work. It may be simply taking your chart as that's the expense columns, and now what we need is sort of a revenues column, putting it in a somewhat different presentation, sort of revenue and expense.
Maybe we should take I don't want to, I love talking technicalities, and we can do it all afternoon, but maybe we should take it offline to for further definition on this, because we have the revenue line, that's the grant income. It's a kind of in the middle of each page. And then we have the staffing in the staffing costs in the far two right columns. A third column and a beloved solution might be other expenditures, which with staffing and fringes plus other would equal the revenue.
Right.
If that's still too blunt an instrument, then maybe we need to talk further about what exactly you're looking for and what you're going to do with that information, which we can certainly help advise you on. Because I would think that the information request would in part want to be informed by what exactly you're looking for within your ambit and why. So I'm happy to consult with you in that regard.
Deputy Speaker Frizzell, I'm looking at what they submitted to us, the
Mhm.
spreadsheet.
Mhm.
So is that really the crux of your concern, is the fact that they have illustrated the cost of salary and fringe for a particular grant, but obviously there are it's less than what the actual grant is. Are you looking to see where the other part of those expenses lie?
That's part of it. Yeah. Yeah. Where that other column. Yeah.
And
And I'm also trying to see whether this is going to satisfy Delegate King. I mean, he's the one asking, where does this money go? He just sees the number coming in. He doesn't see where it's going out.
okay, Delegate King, you have your hand up.
Yeah, if I may, I'm not even so concerned about where the money goes. I just want to know how much is coming in. I got a kind of a question. Do they accrue the revenue from these grants? I mean, how do they manage that? Do you
All right,
know?
so the question is, if I'm understanding, just for clarity, I'm understanding is you're not so concerned about where the money's going, as I just heard you say. You're interested in on the
Councilman
revenue coming
Frizzell
in
is
and who
concerned about
approves
that.
it.
Just let her finish, Delegate
Okay.
King.
So as you
Yeah.
just said, you were looking for how the revenue comes in and who approves it. The answer to that question is revenue comes in from various grant sources, some of which are offered to us, and we take others for which we apply. And then the three commissioners approve grants. Grant approvals do not come up to the Assembly of Delegates for approval as a matter of practice and whatever the charter says. So that's how that kind of works.
Yeah, and I wasn't really looking who approved it. The question I asked was, does the finance department, when they get a grant, do they accrue that over do they accrue any of that money over the year to put it into a budget? Or is it all just lumped in? If they get a $20 million in the first month, is that accrued over the whole year? Do you know?
So that's interesting. I'm not sure. That would be an excellent Carol question. I can tell you internally, each grant has its own, fund number or project number and is accounted for separately. So we don't have these funds commingled in an enormous millions. Yeah. So
I understand that.
how the grant funds that are promised, by virtue of a contract or an agreement, are recognized from an accounting point of view? That is a very interesting question.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer, but I'm sure Carol could tell you if she was here.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Administrator, I believe Dutton, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to sort of add my 2 cents, which is probably worth 2 cents, but we don't. If the question was, do we put excess grant funds into reserves? That we don't do. So when we get a grant, it might be a 6-month grant, it might be a year-long grant, it might be a 3-year grant. And as Vera pointed out, we expend those funds over that time period. But at the end of that, if we have not expended all of those funds at the end of the grant term, they either go back to the grantor. They go back to the grantor. I mean, we make a practice of making sure we expend the grant funds, but we don't reserve, those funds can't flow over into a county reserve. So I
Right.
just
And
wanted
they
to
do
add that.
many of them do roll forward across years as well. Does that answer your question, Mr. King?
Um, not really. Michael, I asked you the question, when you get $20 million worth of grant, do you accrue it over the next 12 months or 14 months, or to be able to develop a budget of when that fund is going to be used?
So anytime, so I would love to get a grant of 20 million. Let's start there. But if we get a grant of 20 million, that's pursuant to a budget that we have created prior to the grant being given to us. You know, that's submitted as part of our grant application. So that budget's fairly detailed. So, you know, if say a $20 million grant, or make it really easy, a $30 million grant over a 3-year period. It depends on what the grant is asking. If the grant is saying we want to start up, you know, a septic testing program, and we're going to spend equal amounts in each year, then we've got a budget for a 3-year period that reflects expending $10 million in each of those 3 years. So I think the answer to your question is, unfortunately, it kind of depends. It depends on what the terms of the grant might be. But whatever those terms are, we cater those budgets, those proposed budgets, and then actual budgets to what the grant is asking, and what we're able to provide, obviously. So it can, in theory, it can vary. I think for the most part, any multi-year grants that we get, we expend fairly consistently over each of those years. So hopefully that starts to answer that.
Okay.
Deputy Speaker Frizel, last
Thank you.
comments. We're gonna move on.
Yeah, I know. So let me sum up this discussion. We had a report which we issued, and there were 3 recommendations in that report. So let me just go quickly through them and see how we've done with them. All right. First recommendation was that the regional government present each department budget with a distinct line item for grant revenue to improve transparency and align presentation with the commission's approach. Well, you've decided at the very beginning, you said, you're not going to do that here because you don't want to confuse and conflate. What you do is you have the budget book is the general fund. You gave us a spreadsheet. That's the grant fund, if you will. That shows us the grants and how it's spent in what departments, for what positions, salary and fringe, but not for what other funds that might be used for something else. Second goal, that grant-related surpluses be explicitly shown, either within the budget materials or through a regular report tying them to the unreserved fund balance. That's the comment I made earlier. I agree with Minister Dutton. We don't keep any excess grant funds. I understand that. We don't do that. However, what we were looking at is, how does that impact our revenues in the budget overall? And does it help create, by spending less than the general fund, it creates some additional reserve funds? That's what we were getting at. I think that's what we were talking about earlier, as one of the things we'd like to see. And I think it's possible that could be calculated. And the last recommendation was a simple tracking mechanism establishing and identifying new positions that begin grant funded and are subsequently transferred to the general fund. Now, we know that has happened on a few occasions in the past. And as it happens, we'd like to be informed of when that kind of conversion from grant funded to budget on the general fund occurs. Those are the 3 recommendations. And I think we've had some response to that, but maybe we just need a little more detail in a couple of respects. That's my concern, Chairman Kelly.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker Frizel. So we're gonna cap it there, and then we're gonna move on to our next item, which is a discussion on the review of the fiscal year 2027 proposed operating budget by the Assembly Standing Committees. And I think most of you, or all of you, received the memo regarding the budget process in the committees. Is that correct? Everybody have that? Everybody has that? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we have that.
Okay. Is there any comment or points of discussion you'd like to bring forward? Deputy Speaker Frizel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my first comment would be, do we think this is enough guidance to the standing committees to review the budgets that are in their hands? Or do we have specific other points that we would like to make sure they look at when they review a budget?
I'll open that up to discussion if anyone has any thoughts on that. I looked this over. I believe it's very thorough. Of course, I have a few years of experience reviewing budgets, so I don't really, I'm not looking at it from that point of view. But Delegate O'Malley, you have any comments on this?
Well, yeah, I think in a general way, you're right. I mean, having been at this for some time, we know how to approach this, and I think maybe the question would be guidance to kind of newer members of the bodies, of the committees, of the assembly in general, about how to go forward with this process, how to read the budget book, how to how to frame a sense of what's going on. I think in terms of the assignments that was talked through, and I did want to actually have a reflection that I in a sense started the process of reshuffling a little bit with moving Children's Cove out from the Health and Human Services budget. And in reflection, I felt badly not to have consulted with the chair of public services, chair and vice chair of public services. I've talked to them subsequently. They're fine with that. But I feel like from my perspective, my process was not appropriate, and I regret it. But other than that, I don't know what else I would say about guidance to committees. No.
I'll reach out to Delegate King. He's one of our newer members. Having read that memo, do you have any questions about the review process?
Well, I have a little bit of problems with the way we're reviewing budgets, period. But I can't get into that because I'm too new to really comment on that, I think. But yeah, I think we could get more detail. How far do you want us to drill down in each line item? How, what are the line items we're looking at, so forth and so on. And I know, Assemblyman Frizzell does a terrific job at that, and I almost sit here and just want to listen to him, and because he's gonna cover the bases, and I feel that. But yeah, I do think there could be more guidance. It could be a little bit more detailed.
So in terms of what the memo lays out, do you feel that it's not thorough enough in terms of what it's requesting? As again, as some of us have been here for a few years, I think every budget cycle is a little bit different. Some require more scrutiny than others, it seems. But again, it seems that we kind of find that as we go through things. We have this process we have with the standing committees. When they begin their line of questioning, they certainly lead in many directions. So I agree. I mean, maybe you believe we should drill down further in certain aspects of it. But again, that's where we sort this out in the committee. And every member of those committee and beyond has the ability to look at any number in there. They can drill down as far as they would like. So I don't think there's any limitation in that regard. So when you say drill down further, there's certainly nothing holding us back from doing that.
And I don't mean that we should do that. I just don't know where we should be going, whether we should be getting further into it, how deep we do it, how much. I mean, we are reviewing a top-down budget. We are not micromanaging the operations. We are reviewing a budget, and it's important we keep that in mind. And those kind of things need to. And when I look at some of the other committees that. And I don't mean to be negative here, but it seems that it doesn't seem that everyone is participative, and I don't know if everybody is on the same page in this. And so I maybe that's something we discuss at the next meeting about where we are and how everyone's feeling about that memo.
Well, I think everybody is going to approach it differently. Not everyone's going to have the same type of questions, and I think that's understandable. But I think everyone understands their responsibility as members of the assembly and that is to review the budget and to look at the line items and be comfortable and confident in the information that they receive from the administration, and then they can make informed decisions on the budget. That being said, I see Deputy Speaker Friesel has his hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll speak briefly. I know we have another meeting coming up very shortly. So I just wondered whether we as a committee, when we talked about, allocating the work to other standing committees, if we feel as if we need to be a little more specific about, make sure you look at this, for example, if, we're looking at salaries, to make sure if they're adding anybody for whatever reason, take a look at that and scrub it. Something that will make it easier for us when we come back and look at the budgets when they come and they report it to us, rather than us having to go back and look at this work. I would just, as a first base, answer anyone's question, I would say look at pages 8 and 9 of the budget book, because there the administration has laid out for us the Barnstable County financial policies. And a budget ought to be reviewed in the first instance and candle that budget to these policies. Does it meet those policies? So, that's to me the starting point for looking at that budget and making sure it fits. I guess the question is, do we as a finance committee feel we should try to come up with a little more detail for each committee to look at, because we don't want to have more work on our plate when it comes back to us? I guess that was what the thinking was.
Well, I would be concerned about micromanaging what these other committees do. I think that we have to have confidence in those folks that are running them. And I suggest that as they report back, if we have any questions about what they're reviewing, we can certainly ask them at the appropriate time. But I will say on that note about employees or FTEs or any changes in employment, those are something these committees tend to look at very closely. Do we have any other comments? If not, I would like take a motion for adjournment so we can get to our next meeting.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Second.
If you take the roll call, please, Mr. Clerk.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Deputy Speaker Friesel,
Yes.
Delegate Gallagher,
Yes.
Chair Killian,
Yes.
Delegate O'Malley,
Yes.
and Delegate King for Assembly Dean Omen.
Yes.
That's unanimous, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your time, everyone. We'll see you shortly.